Welcome to Tripping Over Love, where we talk all about breakdowns, breakups, and breakthroughs. I'm Courtney Corona with Keith Miller.
Our guest today on Tripping Over Love is Paul Gilmartin. Paul was a stand-up comedian turned into podcast host of the Mental Illness Happy Hour. He says it's not really like therapy, it's more like a waiting room that doesn't suck. Here's Paul Gilmartin.
We were laughing because, really one of the precipice to us starting this podcast was the relationship, like Keith and I and our relationship, and this idea that as we grew and sort of evolved, and I know Keith has a whole story to tell you beyond when you all first started talking, when you first met, but we decided to do this podcast because we really believe that all of the conventional things that you hear about love, relationships, and navigating mental health and how it all works together, you have to throw out so much of that in order to really come into a relationship and be in a relationship when you are living your true self and being vulnerable and all of that. So putting you right at the spot at the beginning, but just curious off the cuff, what, through your journey, what are some of the things that you really had to let go of to make sure, you were living as your true self as you were navigating relationships while you were healing?
Number one, boundaries, self-care, saying when I'm uncomfortable, saying when my feelings were hurt, understanding what's a right-sized need or request. Those are... the fact that somebody may have had a difficult life or, formative experiences as a child, you can understand why they might react in a certain way. But if it's not a healthy thing for you to experience, it's okay to understand why they're that way, but to say it's not okay if you use, that word or say something in that tone of voice to me. But to say it lovingly, to express it diplomatically in terms of my feelings, to not take their inventory and say, stop being a bitch or, whatever. I mean, we've had maybe 4 disagreements in the 7 years that we've been together.
What?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
We're pretty proud of how we operate, and we've probably had 4 today.
Yeah.
4 today, Paul.
Yeah, and I'm talking, major ones where it was
Right.
like a disagreement. It wasn't just, what do you don't remember doing that? What are you talking about? We've been to this restaurant before, not those kind of disagreements.
Well, and that's a big difference, right?
Right.
Is like making sure you can have disagreements.
Yes.
It's just the escalation of
Exactly.
it, and how do you navigate that,
Yes,
right?
we don't escalate. We don't escalate. And she said to me early in the relationship, this is the first relationship I've been in where my partner doesn't escalate things. And that is not natural for me. It's natural now, but I used to always act from a place of fear. The fear being, and this was the fear that probably got in the way of my then marriage more than anything else, was my fear that whatever it was that was happening right now was going to keep happening forever. And so instead of just dealing with something with the energy of, oh, this is a one-off, let's deal with this, it was, you're going to do this for the rest of my life, and I got to come at it with an energy of, this is super important that you didn't wash the dishes correctly.
Right.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
Right. And then it lives another day. Like the next day, you're still talking about it.
Yes.
Like it avalanches into other things.
yeah, and then she's put on edge because the way that I talk to her, it's not that she has a problem that I, didn't like the way the fact that the dishes were put in the rack dirty. She understands that, yeah, nobody wants to eat off a dirty dish, but my lecturing, authoritarian tone of voice, thinking I need to change her. So giving up the idea of changing somebody and understanding I can express things in terms of what I'm experiencing and what I want or don't want, but it's up to her to figure out how to get there. My sickness comes in when I think it's up to me to tell her, you need to go do this, you need to go to this or that. And, something that came up early in my relationship with my girlfriend was she had some anger issues. And it turns out there was some untreated depression, and she went on meds. But if I hadn't spoken up and said something, it would never got dealt with. And I said it lovingly, I said, your anger is kind of becoming an issue for me, and I feel myself kind of pulling away, and I don't want that. I want to be closer to you, but it's affecting our relationship, and most of it was work related. She would get angry about work. She was working a lot. I also brought that up as
I know how that goes.
as an issue, and
Yeah.
and then the other thing was I felt like I was her only release valve for bitching about work. And I'm there for her when she talks about work, but it was too much for me in the beginning. And so I was like, I can't be the person to hold all this. I can't be the only outlet. It's just I can't do it. And here's the awesome thing about expressing our needs, and you guys know this. When we put the ball in the other person's court, we get to find out how they swing at it, or if they'll even swing at it.
Yeah.
And she swung at it, Yeah. She's a teammate. She got on meds. She's aware of her behaviors. She listens.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
we feel like a team.
Can I tell them about what we were having a bit of a tiff about?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So, I'm wearing this shirt. Paul, you can't see it, but I'm wearing this shirt that I think is completely wrinkle free. I mean, and because it is, Paul, I'm telling you. And she was kind enough to iron this for me yesterday, and then I promptly put it threw it on my bed and then put it on again today for this. And she said, I need to go iron that. And it just lit something inside of me that, you talked about boundaries, Paul. After we processed, my overreaction, which it was a big overreaction, and I apologized. And she was gracious enough to let me give her a hug and let me say sorry. And she's the kind of person that is thoughtful, and she gives me credit for knows that even if I do something stupid, tell her, no, it's not wrinkled, don't iron my shirt.
Meanwhile, the wrinkles are screaming at me, and I know we're going to get on camera and see them everywhere.
Well, people can put it in the comments whether they think it's wrinkled or not. But so I feel lucky, Paul, that we have this as well, and that's so refreshing for me. I recently got divorced. The divorce was finalized 2 months ago, and when I talked to you back a few years ago, it was the beginning of a separation, or maybe the separation had not yet happened. I forget, but so Courtney and I have been dating for 2 years, and that's just so refreshing to me. Like you said, Paul, that you can push, and it's even if it hurts, they're not going to go away, and they're not going to escalate and disappear by escalating and becoming a different person.
Yeah, it was a revelation to me the first time I learned the tool of just expressing what I'm feeling rather than saying, you're doing this, to...
Yeah.
Do you remember that moment?
I do.
The first time that...
I do.
Yeah, what happened?
And it started with, I was in a disagreement with my then wife, and I wanted to, do some type of character assassination or, go for the jugular. What I would usually do is I would just get very cold and clinical. And I would think that wasn't escalating, but it's passive aggressively escalating because there's no warmth there. It's just very dismissive. I would act like it wasn't a big deal, but my tone of voice was just, withering. And I wanted to do that because I had anger. And I said, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so fucking angry. I want to put my fist through a wall. And it was the best that I could do to not go on the offensive, to just say, I'm confused and angry. And it didn't escalate because she didn't have anything to defend. I expressed what I was feeling, that I didn't even know what I was feeling other than anger. And I felt like just a wimp for not fighting. It felt like I was just trying to hold in lava.
Paul, when you said that you'd said you were confused and angry, was the confused part something new? Like, was that the vulnerability showing up?
I think the confusion was I didn't know why I was angry or where the truth was in what we were disagreeing about. Because I think previously, being a know-it-all, I would just, whatever was the first thing to pop into my mind, oh, this is the problem, I would just launch like a terrible courtroom lawyer with all energy into what I believed without ever even thinking about it, without ever even wondering, oh, might I have a part in this? And that's one of the things that sobriety and support groups have helped me with, is to look at my part in things. And that has been very helpful for my relationships, both romantic and otherwise. So it just started with admitting I don't even know what I'm feeling, other than anger. I'm confused. That's an okay place to start.
It's honesty.
It's honesty.
Right?
You invite them in.
You can't go wrong if you're honest.
You're giving them the opportunity to be interested in what it is that you're feeling, to come and maybe say, is there something I can do? Is there something you want to talk about? Rather than having to respond to saying, you're being such and such. So that was a turning point for me.
Yeah, and with that comes, I would imagine, an evolution of comfort in vulnerability, where you're starting to toy with it and see, and then kind of figuring out, okay, it's a safe space for me to be, or it makes sense for me to be there. And I'm curious for you as a comedian, right? And I am in no way, shape, or form a comedian, but I do tend to use comedy to get through. I joke about stuff when Keith and I have a lot of joke. I'll just share this. So when Keith is cranky, my thing is typically to be like, all right, so do you want a BJ? Like, just to get him out of where he is in the conversation.
Paula, I've got a winner here. This is you're looking at.
I can't get him to laugh though. He will, and I keep telling him at some point he will laugh at that joke, but with that, there's the underlying thing where you're covering up whatever you're actually feeling through comedy. So for somebody who is so used to doing that, right, and you get on a stage and you make people laugh and you're entertaining people, and you have to make this transition in order to survive, to be vulnerable and honest about your feelings too. How do you walk that line, and how do you balance that with a sense of bravery, but also keeping that lightheartedness that likely gets you through?
It's a great question.
A lot of the things that you've gone through.
A really great question. It was so unnatural at first because, as you know, the humor for a lot of us is used in place of vulnerability. And I like to say, on my podcast, humor's welcome, but not in place of vulnerability. It's one of the whole reasons I started the podcast was I had learned in one of my support groups that intimacy depends on vulnerability. And I was illiterate in terms of vulnerability when I rolled into my support groups. So it was very weird at first, but it became reinforced positively more and more the more I realized, oh, I have to do so much less controlling than I think I need to do to be safe in the world. It never occurred to me that safety could come from just letting go. From just saying, I'm scared.
Right. Right. Yeah, there's like an expectation, I think, in our minds, and I'll speak for myself, but like there's a part of me that thinks that if I let go, there's nothing there. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Like there's going to be probably emotions that I think I shouldn't have to feel, but like, stop being in denial is, like there's, you've got to face what emotions are in you.
Yeah, a life of running from emotions is so much more dangerous than the emotions we think are dangerous to feel.
Right.
I've sat through just about every type of emotion in the last 20 years that I would not sit through before then. That it was just whatever I had to do, get drunk, fight, act out sexually, you name it, anything but to feel those feelings. And I now have sat through all of those feelings, and none of them killed me, but my running from them previously was killing me.
Yeah, it takes a lot to realize the pain that you feel fighting it and fighting the emotions is much harder on you, much more intense, and goes for much longer.
Much longer.
Than going through and just facing the emotions. It's uncomfortable for sure.
Yeah.
But the impact is light years apart.
Yeah, and we're not making it worse.
Right.
Yeah, at the very least, it starts to like just neutralize a little bit, settle.
Yeah, another revelation for me was that the universe can oftentimes have beautiful things in store for you on the other side of really, really painful experiences. You can find community related to a shared struggle that has a depth to it that I had never imagined. I had never imagined that meaning and purpose were more important than money and recognition. I mean, I love money and recognition. I could always have some more, but meaning and purpose, I will be dead without meaning and purpose, because the emptiness will drive me to drink or whatever compulsive activity to degrade my life.
We really should be teaching that more. You do. You just grow up with drive, ambition. How do I rate against somebody else or against my peers, when it really is, it comes down to internally, are you happy with what?
Yeah, it never occurred to me that by trying to separate myself from the pack, to be special, to be financially successful, that might have exacerbated my loneliness. Mm-hmm. If you're trying to separate yourself from everybody, you're going to feel separate from everybody.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You can't have it both ways.
Yeah. What would you say to people who are dealing with, they're trying to make their relationship work. They're trying to stay on track, but their career has just gone sideways. And, you talked about boundaries, but how, our worth, is often tied up in what we're doing and what we're able to offer people. And our professions take up so much of our time and life energy. So when that goes sideways, when you get, set back, you're not where you want to be. How do you prevent that? Have you gone through that with you? I know it seems like you've adjusted your sense of like what it means to be successful, but I still imagine that you have things that you want to achieve and goals, and and your partner does. How do you handle that?
That's a great question, and I do happen to be going through that right now. Even though while the podcast has always kind of been critically successful, I made the financial decision 2 years ago to sever my relationship with BetterHelp, who had been my primary sponsor.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Accounted for over half the income,
It's a big
probably
deal.
3/4 of it. And I did it because in good conscience, I couldn't continue to work with them because of their business practices. And it wasn't a difficult a difficult decision to make. I didn't go back and forth on whether or not to do it. The difficulty was the impact that it has had. And so, the show is in the red since then. And yeah, there's financial struggle. I have to make sure that my sense of self does not come from my profession. It can contribute to my sense of self, but I feed my sense of self in other ways, through how I navigate the world, through my relationships and my support groups, through how I treat myself, my relationship with my girlfriend, my hobbies, playing hockey, my friends that I play hockey with. All of those things feed me. If anything, I could probably give more weight to my professional energy, but there's a part of me that is very kind of immature, that doesn't want to do the things, that essentially doesn't want to eat its vegetables. There's a part of me that just is like, no, I just want to play. I don't want to do that part because that part's boring. And that's a struggle for me. And it does affect my how I look at myself, how I talk to myself, because there's times that I really am disgusted at that part of me that can't be a harder worker. I've always been somebody that is driven by passion. If I'm passionate about it, I will work my ass off. I'm passionate about woodworking and building furniture. And I'm in there in the garage when it's 95 degrees, and I'm in there for 6 hours, 8 hours, because I love it and it doesn't feel like work. So I'm not a lazy person. If there's not passion attached to it. So I don't know what you would call that, unrealistic. The financial thing, the work thing, it destroys a lot of relationships because that's all people think about. And trust me, I have like insomnia, I think, from financial worries. So it does affect my life, but I'm not snapping at my girlfriend. We've made the decision to move in together to help financially. She's a very understanding person, so she does a great job of being supportive and giving a nudge here and there, but not nagging. She's very encouraging. She'll say, "Did you post that new Instagram thing of that woodworking video that you were taking?" And I'll be like, "No, I forgot." And she never shames me about it. It's nice.
Yeah.
Because you know the feeling when somebody's nagging or when somebody is coming from a place of gentle love.
I don't know if I personally always know, Paul.
Yeah.
But thank you.
This is a good thing for Keith to hear.
I'm taking in his words.
Yeah.
I'm taking in his words.
Well, it's an evolution too, isn't it? Where you're sort of trusting. There's clearly a lot of parallels with like conversations that we have. I have a lot of opinions, and my tone can be a little direct and harsh. But also my intention is typically at my core is to like be helping.
Every single time, I realize that you're trying to be helpful.
Yeah.
And
but
you are genuinely so helpful, and we're still ironing. Speaking of ironing, we're ironing that.
Yeah. That's true. But there's a point where you just have to trust that you're in a safe space and intentions are positive or all of that. And so you've talked so much too about internally how you're thinking about things and reshaping things. But one of the other cool things that I think you've really done really well, which is so evident in your podcast, is creating a safe space for people to feel comfortable. And I imagine creating that with your girlfriend first or whomever, people in your life, and but doing it on the podcast as well. Like there's different ways you go about it. So how do you think about creating a space where not only you're being vulnerable, but it's okay for somebody else to feel comfortable being vulnerable with you?
I think I've always wanted to have those conversations in my life. I just didn't know how, and comedy was getting in the way. To be cynical and sarcastic is the easiest thing in the world because you risk nothing. I tried to, in my stand-up, to talk about deeply personal or vulnerable things, but I just didn't have the nerve to sit through the silence. I've always been envious of comedians that are comfortable taking the audience through that 2 minutes without a joke while they talk about something that's important.
Who's that one that we just saw? Tig Notaris?
Yeah.
Tig Notaro.
Yep.
Yeah, Tig.
She's
she does that so much.
Yeah. It's very impressive when you see somebody do it well. And so when I started doing the podcast, I realized, this is the way for me to do that. I mean, one of the things that inspired the podcast was having gone off my meds, suicidal ideation coming, and realizing, oh my God, I got fooled by the depression. Podcast would be a great place to talk about the baffling nature of mental struggles. And the template for that was my support groups, where I learned how to be vulnerable and where I realized stories are so powerful. I will never remember facts, but to the day I die, I will remember some of the stories I heard that gave me information about people's lives that are way more important than statistics. And so I thought that'd be it. And plus you get the humor sometimes. And you get the complexity of it. Stories are so, there's just details to a real life story that you couldn't make up, that sometimes that's why we coined in the podcast the word awfulsome, where
Awfulsome.
it's so
I love that.
awful and so awesome all in one. And those are my favorite moments, are the things where it's like, oh, that is so darkly funny. Wasn't funny at the time, but looking back at it, you're like, that's fucking awesome.
Okay, so just as we wrap up, I'm going to do about a 180 on level of seriousness. But we pulled out some just like relationship things that you often hear and would love to get your perspective on it. First one, what do you say to somebody who says never go to bed angry?
Never go to bed angry. I don't think you have a choice. Yeah, ideally, no. But if you're a person that ruminates, good luck. I'm a ruminator. I I can go to bed without being angry these days, but I have much more difficulty going to bed not worried.
Ah, that's a good way to put it. Okay, last one. You can't love someone until you love yourself.
Kind of true. At least a mature love, a three-dimensional, sustainable love. You can be excited about someone if you don't love yourself, but your chances are you're going to look for them to fill parts of you that you need to fill yourself, and that's going to kill the shelf life of that relationship.
Yeah, and ideally you're loving yourself more deeply too as you grow.
Yeah.
And it's all sort of working together.
Yeah, and you got more to share with them if there isn't a void inside you. I like to think of the relationship as, just the icing on the cake. It's not the cake. Our relationship with ourselves is the cake.
Paul Gilmartin, his podcast is The Mental Illness Happy Hour. So good to have you.
Thanks. It's nice to see you again, Keith.
Thanks for listening to Tripping Over Love. Subscribe now to make sure you get the latest episode and drop us a comment or a question. See you next time.